Welcome one and all to today, the only one, a good one. So happy that you are here. Let's make this one a great one. I'm your host, Cassius Stallings. Blessed and honored to be with you. So glad that you tuned in to Aspire. Aspire is a webinar that we host once a month with Health Visions Midwest, Support Wayne, and we hope to empower and inform folks on different health topics, whether that's living our best lives financially, which we'll talk about today, or physically, mentally, and spiritually. We want to take this moment to respect the pause and by doing so, by saying a prayer. Now, if prayer is something that you're not really accustomed to doing, feel free to mute us at this time and then join us again in a minute. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord. We thank you for today. We ask that you open up our minds and our ears and our hearts to what it is that we're about to receive. Just bless us during this time. Bless us as we leave from this moment and continue to guide us and to be with us each and every day. And it's your name that we pray these things. Thank you, God. Amen. Amen. All right. So as I said, my name is Cassius Stallings, and I serve as the wellness coordinator with Health Visions Midwest Support Wing. And today we are talking about health and wealth, the connection between home ownership and our health. How does those two relate? I'm excited. We have Kyle with Ruoff here on the call with us. In a moment, I'll have him introduce himself. And I want to take this time for us again to respect the pause, but to align ourselves with our thoughts about health and wealth. What exactly do we think that means? How do we even go about that conversation on the connection there? And as we're thinking about that and we're taking that moment, I ask that Kyle now introduce himself, let us know who he is and what company he's representing today.
Yeah, so I'm Kyle Lunford. I am the Director of Home Ownership and Community Development over at Ruoff Mortgage. That's just a really cool way of me saying that I get to help people throughout the community understand their finances and how that translates into home ownership. And even just as important, whatever your big dream is. So even if you're currently a homeowner, if you have a big dream that you want to accomplish something, whether that be like starting a business, whether that be taking a trip to Hawaii, that's my dream. I mention that a lot. So hopefully at some point somebody will give me free tickets to Hawaii, or I'll win some sweepstakes. But how do you plan for things like that? How do you put different processes in place when it comes to your finances? So that's what I have the pleasure of doing. I'm so honored and blessed to be here. I always love being able to speak with people or meet with people individually or in group settings such as this, whether it's virtual or in person. I'm always happy to help. So I know that Cassius can attest that my door is always open. It might be a text message or email that you send me. It's like, okay, look, we can meet, we can kind of go through the steps of where you're at, but it's going to be a lot of great information about what the processes look like. And I know we have some fantastic questions that were sent in earlier. So feel free to go to the Q&A or the chat line and ask any questions. As those come up, I'll be able to answer those. And I always like to make everything a conversation and not just a presentation. So as you have questions, if something comes up, feel free to send me a message on the chat. And if it is something that I'm going to talk about later, I might not get to it until later, but send those messages in, send those questions in. With that being said, I'll turn it back over to Cassius for a quick portion of what the rest of the presentation will look like, and then I'll get more into the presentation.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, exactly what Kyle was saying is our hope for today's conversation. It's not just going to be him and I. We do have some questions already set for Kyle, to ask him, but we want to hear some questions from you all as you're tuning in. And as questions arise, maybe there's something he said, and you're like, wait, I want to know some more about that. Please, as he stated, drop them in the chat, to put them in the Q&A so we can answer them. Those of you, in other forums right now, like on Facebook Live, drop them in there as well. We'll get those questions answered as well. And so that'll be the flow of it. Again, we'll do this Q&A. We'll have some questions, and Kyle will speak on it, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question we'll ask is, how can financial stress lead to health issues?
That is a brilliant question. What I will tell you is that is be one of the parts that we talk about throughout the presentation. So I think what I'll do is I'll go through the presentation first. So let me
Okay.
get my screen shared here. And if you're on the webinar, let me know once that pops up. You can give me a thumbs up in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on that. So if any questions or anything comes up. All right. So one of the biggest things between understanding the connection between health and financial wellness is you have to first off acknowledge that they're both important and they're so intertwined. Get the table of contents here. So as we're kind of going through it, I want to give you guys a precursor of what that's going to look like. So we're going to talk about why it's important. We're going to talk about good health decisions, and then the importance of that. Then we're going to talk about financial wellness, and then the importance of that, and then how these two come together. It is very essential that we understand the importance of both and how they intertwine. So I put this part on here, why it's important. It's important because it's biblical. That's why there were so many different things in like the Old Testament where you were supposed to do this. You're supposed to keep the Sabbath. You're supposed to only eat clean meats, all the different things. So there's a connection from a biblical standpoint. I won't get too deep into that, but I definitely encourage you to look into that if that is a perspective that you want to encounter. So your health. As we think about health, a lot of times I think it becomes more of a question of, do I have diabetes? Do I have high blood pressure? Do I have hypertension? It's more of what physical ailments am I dealing with and how I'm dealing with those things. So here's a couple studies that I did some research on when it comes to your physical health and your mental health. When a person's financial wellness is low, you have financial stresses, you're 4 times more likely to have a poor physical health. Essentially, if you think about that, the amount of stress that you put on your body when you think about your finances is overwhelming. It keeps you up at night. It makes you make bad decisions. It makes your life a lot more difficult. And those are not my words. That's from WebMD, a coalition of doctors who have acknowledged that the more financial stresses that you have, the poorer your health, your physical health will be. Financial stress leads to anxiety, depression, behavioral changes. One of the not cool things, but one of the things that I read about, it was cool how as people came out of kind of those financial stresses, these areas didn't necessarily go away, but they were less impactful on their life. Very cool link that I would love to share with you. If you want any links or anything, again, hit the chat button and say like, hey, I want that, and I can send that over to you. And then financial stress also causes physical symptoms like stomach aches, headaches. I know I've been in situations where I have a family of 3, or actually it's a family of 5, include myself, my wife, and 3 kids. And there's been times where it's like, man, I can't sleep. My head hurts. I wake up and I'm just like, man, I just feel nauseous. And a big part of that is just due to your financial situation. When you know you have big things that you have to take care of, but you don't necessarily know how to take care of them or when you can take care of them, those things impact you tremendously. And then according to the APA, there is a survey that's published basically saying that 33% of Americans eat unhealthy foods. And a lot of times we're eating unhealthy foods because it's due to our stress. And if we go back to the left side of the screen, you'll see that some of that stress is financial stress. So that's where it's a crazy cycle of I'm stressed about my finances. So I'm going to eat that extra bowl of ice cream. I'm going to eat some more chips. I'm going to do all the healthy behaviors that I want to do, but my flesh is telling me that this is what's going to fulfill me. And that is a crazy cycle. And we'll talk about how we can break those crazy cycles here in a little bit. And then something that was more striking to me is the impact that financial stress has on chronic illnesses. And it really goes back to what we just mentioned. If you have those financial stresses, then you're going to make poor decisions. And the period of time that you make those poor decisions, the longer that's going to impact you over the long run. There's a difference between being in a season and then being stuck in a place. That is something that I had to learn through a lot of guidance from people who are older and more wise than myself, that it's okay to be in a place where it's like, I'm just stuck and I'm frustrated, but it's not okay to stay in that place. You have to sometimes ask questions, reach out to people, and get outside of your comfort zone to figure how to get out of what your current comfort zone is. Financial wellness. So financial wellness is really a loaded topic. A lot of times we think about financial wellness from a standpoint of, I have the house of my dream, I have a car of my dream, I have whatever that might look like. I have that trip to Hawaii, but financial wellness is so much bigger than just the material. Let this load up here so you guys can all see that, because they all tie in, they're all intertwined. So really, financial wellness is a lifestyle. You have spending habits that you're going to do. You know, you have a utility bill. You know, you have food that you have to provide for your family. You know your family size and how much food that's going to cost you each month based off your family size. But how often do we take time to look at the spending habits we have? Like, okay, we go to McDonald's 6 times in a 7-day period, or we go there every now and then, or even if we go there once a month. What are your spending habits? What do you spend your money on? This is at this point, I want to give you guys the opportunity. If you want, I can send you a link to one of the things we have called the spending tracker and the budget tracker. These are tools that you can use to know exactly where you're at. And the reason why I love to have it printed out or use it, even if you use like an Excel worksheet, is because as you write it down and you think about it, you can always go back and look at it. So this is very important when it comes to knowing your spending habits and then changing the way you think about your spending habits, because most of it is unconscious. You don't even think about where you spend your money. And then the savings plan, if you know what you're saving for and why you're saving for it, it makes it more of an important thing. It makes it more of a priority because, okay, I have this plan. This is what I want to do. But how do I get there? And this is a good time for me to mention to you that we do have the Opening Doors to Home Ownership course going through Fort Wayne, or I'm sorry, Health Visions Midwest. And you guys are always welcome to come to that. Cassius will talk a little bit more about the timing of it later on his call, but that's an opportunity for you to get information, get plans. I'm always happy to do one-on-one plans with people for savings. And the most important part to know, it's completely free. So keep an eye out for that. And then borrowing plans. Borrowing is not necessarily the greatest way to build wealth, but it depends on the type of borrowing you're doing and why you're borrowing. If you have a situation where you absolutely need to get your car fixed because you can't make it to work, and if you don't have a job, then you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your mortgage, you can't get food. So sometimes you have to borrow money, but you have to have a plan for it. And there's a lot of things that go out through mailing things and everything like that to say, like, here, you can get up to $10,000. I saw a commercial the other day say you can get up to $50,000. Just call this number. Even if you can get it, what is your plan for that money before you get it? And then what's your plan to repay the money once you get it? So having a plan for that. And then the consistency in which you review the plans. So if you have a plan and it's going great for the first 6 months, but you have a 24-month plan, what happens in month 8? What happens in month 12? What happens in month 16? If you don't stay with the plan and review the plan, then that plan really falls to the wayside, because we all know life happens. You may lose a job. Someone may get sick. I have my 10-year-old son. He's playing football. At any given time, any play, he could twist the ankle, break a finger, and that's a doctor's bill. So what's the plan? How often are you reviewing your plans when it comes to your financial wellness? So how these things really do work together. Excuse me for a second, because I'm running out of breath. Speaking of health plans, I have asthma, so my asthma is kicking in a little bit, so I can feel it. All right, so the connection between these two forms of wellness is financially well people are more likely to have a primary care physician. And essentially, that's someone you know, you trust, and you can go to them whenever you want to, whenever you need to. That will greatly increase your health plan. Because just like with your finances, you have to have a health plan. You have to know, okay, I do have these symptoms. I know I do have these ailments. And it's actually a great segue when me mentioning my asthma, because I have a specific doctor I go to for my asthma, and I see him every 6 months just to know where I'm at. It's like, okay, seasons are changing, allergies are kicking in, my asthma is a little bit tight. What do we need to do? We need to switch prescription. We need to have something else. So when you have that, basically that accountability partner from a health wellness standpoint, it really changes it. And that's something you can do when you're financially well. It increases the relationship you have with food and your food choices. This one was really tough for me, and it's still tough to this day, because my parents are from Mississippi. So my mom, I grew up on all kinds of Southern food, all the oxtails and okra and fried chicken every Sunday with ribs, all the Southern food that you can think of. My mom would just cook that on a Tuesday. And the relationship I had with food was different than a relationship that my wife had with food, because she is more on the healthier side. So one of the things that I had to learn, and really, again, it goes to changing your perspective of what you're putting into your body, because your body is your temple, and it's a temple for Jesus. But how do you change that when you have a sugar addiction or a salt addiction, or those are, I say addiction, but your body's just used to that. Your taste buds are very much leaning more towards the sugary or the savory or the salty or whatever it may be. And one of the things I had to learn is I need to diversify my palate, trying different foods that I would never try. As you try them, it's like, okay, this is good. And now I can go order a kale salad. I might put a little salt and pepper on it, but just a little. It's better than me going and order a cheeseburger with bacon and all the other fixings on it. So it's just the way that you think about your relationship with food. And that is something that increases as you become more financially well, because it's not like going to Burger King. It's like, okay, now I have to put together a plan for my food, for my health. And then financially well individuals tend to get sick less frequently. And a big part of that is because of the food that they're putting into their bodies. And also because they have people in their life, like a primary care physician and like a specialist, if you have anything like diabetes or anything like that. And then the other part of that too is going to places like Health Visions Midwest, where you can get tools and resources. So even if you don't necessarily have the means right now, you have resources and tools with the people at Health Visions who are willing to help guide you through different products, different services, different avenues. So even if you can't afford to go to the doctor every 3 months or every 6 months, or even every year, there are resources and tools and people who are willing to help. You just have to, again, step outside of your comfort zone and be willing to share your story and find out what's available for you. All right, so we will get into the questions here in a second, but I just wanted to go back to the chat and see if anybody added anything, if there's any other questions that came up. But with that being said, Cassius, if you wanted to read off the questions, we can get into that now.
Okay. Yep. I think a lot of what you said covered some of them. One of them still just wanted to look back and this can just be expounded on just a bit. What role does education play in that link between wealth and health?
Yeah, so it plays a huge role. The fact that everyone on this call has questions, has the desire to be further educated on that conversation. And it's one of those things that you don't know what you don't know until you ask somebody or somebody tells you. Or worst case scenario, you don't know what you don't know until you get into an emergency situation. So education plays a huge role, but the biggest part about education is it is difficult because you have to step out of your comfort zone. And then the other side of that too is you have to put your trust in somebody who you may not know. And that is a huge issue, because if you just stay where you're at, then you're stuck. But if you ask somebody to help you, okay, here's a like a, not a quote, but like if you're stuck in quicksand, you can try to fight your way out of it. But if there's somebody around and you ask them to, can you throw me a line? They can pull you out of quicksand. But you can't fight your way out of quicksand. You just dig yourself deeper and deeper until now you have an emergency. But when you ask for that help, someone can give you a lifeline. Someone can pull you out. Or if you can't swim and you jump in a pool or get pushed in a pool, you need somebody to help you. If you can't do it yourself, somebody has to come and help you. So I hope that answers the question. If not, I'm pulling up the chat here as well.
Yeah, I think it does answer in the sense of realizing that when we think of education, we don't need to think of the traditional setup. Like we don't need to think of getting more schooling or more education that way, but it could be the education of getting connected with someone. As you mentioned and shamelessly plugged us, and we're on the call, so of course I will. Coming to Health Visions Midwest and getting plugged in, with the Ruoff Mortgage with Kyle, and getting that education. So I think that answers it in the sense of us realizing, like, hey, it's maybe asking people what we don't know. Someone who has reached a certain place or has the knowledge, and asking them. There was a question that came up in the chat. Aside from tracking spending, can you give some tips of ways to build wealth?
So tips to build wealth. The first thing I'll say is home ownership. If this was one of my classes, I would go off script and I would pull up the housing track for 2012 till today. But when you purchase a home, it's something that you own. And that trajectory is always going to increase. Let me rephrase that. That trajectory typically increases. There are situations and times where houses depreciate, but 90% of the time, that house is an asset that's going to appreciate. So that means the value of your house is going to be greater a year or 2 or 3 years. So if you had bought a house, let's say 2 years ago, that house probably has increased by, I would say, $20,000 to $30,000. And that's here in the Fort Wayne market. So that's the quickest way to build wealth. And then you have, not only do you have the appreciation, but you have, what we call equity. So equity is basically every time you make a monthly mortgage payment, you're taking down, A, you're paying the interest to the bank or financial institution, but B, you're bringing down your principal balance. And that equity is something you can utilize for whatever your heart desires. I've had people, when I worked in the banking industry doing like home equity loans, They come in and say like, my dream car, I just saw it on Facebook Marketplace. They want $40,000. I'm gonna use the equity I have in my house to go buy that car cash. And then some of them say, well, I'm gonna take them 35 and hope that they take that, because it's like, why not? You have the equity. Every time you make a mortgage payment, you're essentially paying your future self. You're putting money away for your future. You're adding more to your equity. So that is probably the best way to add wealth. But the other side of that too is being able to have that savings plan. Because once you get to having a strategic savings plan, then you can reach out to financial advisors who can put together comprehensive savings plan that's a little bit deeper than what you would be able to do. And then you start talking about investments or bonds or all the other stuff that you can do. But if you don't have a personal savings plan, you go to a financial advisor, they give you this plan, because you have to think in mind. It's the same thing with, honestly, the mortgage industry, your realtors, insurance agents, financial advisors, everybody in the financial sector is a service. So there's going to be a fee, there's going to be a cost to it. But if you can create a savings plan for yourself to where you know, okay, I'm disciplined enough to save $500 a month, or I'm disciplined enough to save $50 a month, or even if it's $5 a month, it's all about the discipline and how much you are willing to put into it. And as my dad taught me and my brothers, is you need to save until it hurts. Because if you don't feel the pain of you saving, then where are you spending your money? You need to feel the pain of saving before you get into anything outside of just putting $5, $10, $15, $20 a month away. Do you suggest buying a home with interest rates? Absolutely. I always suggest buying a home, even with the interest rates. Now, the reason why I say that is because, as I mentioned, the appreciation and the equity. Even if you have a 14% interest rate, you're going to pay a lot more in interest, but you're also going to be getting equity. And the chances are that house is going to appreciate. So I always suggest it because, A, you have the ownership, you have the equity, and you have appreciation working for you. When it comes to renting, you have no ownership, you have no control over what you can do to your house. I think a good example is, I think you guys can see it, this wall over here. Because we own this house, my wife changed this all like 7 times. And I didn't have to ask anybody. I just had to say, okay, if it's in the budget, it's in the budget. If it's not in the budget, then we can't do it. But if you're renting, if you want to paint a wall, you might need to get permission. Or if you want to take a wall out, which I didn't do it, I'm not there. But whatever you want to do, it's your property. You can make that decision for yourself. And that is the beauty of home ownership. You can make the decision, you own it. So yes, I absolutely suggest that if you have the ability to purchase a home, even though interest rates are high, go for it.
I want to know if you could spend some more time, perhaps talking about the process to getting a savings plan in place. You know, what that looks like. How do we go about that?
Yeah. So if you want to look at a savings plan, putting that together, you need to look at what you're trying to purchase, what you're trying to acquire. So if you want to purchase $100,000 house, you have to look at what your closing costs will be and what your down payment needs to be. There are programs out there where you can do 0% down payment. There's also programs out there, like if you go FHA, you can put 3.5% down. So you're talking about $3,500, and then closing costs, they typically range about $3,200 to $3,500. That varies. So that's a variable number. So if you're looking at it, my goal for savings would be, let's say $7,000. So you take that $7,000 and then you just divide that by the amount of months that you want to save for. So if I'm saving for 24 months, I'll take that 7,000 divided by 24. And if that doesn't look right, I'm like, okay, well, now I need to go 36 months. Or if it looks really good, it's like, I can do this in 18 months, or I can do this in 6 months. So knowing what you're saving for is the key part of the plan. And then essentially what I like to call reverse financing it from there. Okay, if I need this, then I have 16 months to do it. So that is one of the facets of the savings plan. There's a couple other things that we definitely will talk about in the course. Before I get to the chat, was there another question that we wanted to get to from the pre-submitted? Because I definitely don't want to neglect that.
We can go to the chat and then come back.
Okay. All right. So what criteria do mortgage company look for to approve loans for home ownership? Are there special programs about low income earners? Yes, absolutely. So I will not get into specifics of criteria. That is more of a one-on-one type of conversation, just because it varies based off individual circumstances. But there are programs out there for low-income families, moderate to low income. There's programs out there if you want to buy in a specific area. There's programs if you are in the military, or you are the spouse of someone in the military. So there's several different programs. It just depends on which ones would make sense for you. So that's such a general or more of a specialized type of question. But yes, to answer the question, there are a ton of programs out there. And there's also programs out there that you can combine with other programs. To give you an example of what that means, you can do, and this is not for our area, so that's why I'm always hesitant to talk about specific programs. But in a city in Indiana, you can do what their city has enacted, which would be a $10,000 towards your down payment. Plus, you can still utilize up to $5,000, and then you can also combine that with like an FHA. So you can have all your closing costs taken care of. You can only bring 3.75 or 3.5% down. And then you can also combine other products to it. So that's just an example of that education piece and stepping out of the comfort zone and being willing to be open and tell your story, what you're trying to do and where you're at. Because there is definitely a very specialized, when I was originating, that there was never a conversation where it was, okay, this is what the product that you need to be in. This is the down payment assistance program that you need to go to. It's always, I need to know what your story is, and now we can figure it out from there, because we can plug and play, and that's what our originators do. They look at each individual file, each individual borrower, and see what works best. Did I miss anything in here? The link to track spending, I'll get that added. Can you name a few programs for low-income earners to share some of those we serve?
Kyle, can you hear me? Is my audio still there? My computer is frozen.
Okay, it threw me off there for a second. I was like, did I just lose everybody? So yes, I can't hear you. But so if you go to IHCDA, so Indiana Housing Community Development Authority, they have a full list of those products. And also, I'll put this in the chat, because if you go to Indiana Mortgage Bankers Association, there is a full list of different programs for the entire state. So can I name them off the top of my head? Unfortunately not, because I am not originating right now, but I can definitely give you some resources to where you can pull that up. I know ICDA, they have what they call is the Home Boost program. There's a bunch of stipulations on there that I'm not as familiar with, but I know that they do offer down payment assistance up to, I believe it's 9,000. Don't quote me on that, but they offer down payment assistance from that program. And they also have another program where they do up to 6,000. I know for a fact we still have the Indiana Hops program, which you can get up to $10,000, but there's certain requirements. It is based off of income. And I know those funds are come as you go. So that's where that planning comes in. Because if you plan on using that, then you have to be ready to go before the time that they release those funds. And then even outside of down payment assistance, I would say one of the key things that to think about is ways that you can do it on your own, essentially. So if you think about your tax return, if you don't have a plan for your tax return, then you just end up spending it. And by the time you get to the end of the year, it's like, okay, well, I'm waiting for my next tax return. And in some cases, if you get your tax return, you're waiting in like 2 months, and now it's like, well, that money's gone. Working in financial services, I've seen people spend $15,000, $20,000 in 2 weeks. So I think that is another way to really plan for it. Because if you don't have to use a down payment assistance, and you don't have to, if you don't have to meet those stipulations, then that puts you in a much better space. You really are taking control of your own situation. I hope that answered the question. Now I can see you in 2 places, Cassius. All right, as we work through these technical difficulties, I will look through here and, oh, here's a great question I wanted to work through. So one piece of advice for someone who's struggling with finances today. So if you're currently struggling with your finances, the first thing I would say is I'll go back to the whole concept of, if you're in quicksand, don't try to fight your way out of it. Ask for help, see who has something to help you with that. One of the best ways I would say that you can do it is simply by asking and seeing what you can do to either decrease your debt or increase your income. One of the things that is very possible, depending on who you owe money to and where it's at, you can go to places and say, okay, I owe back taxes, or I owe so much to AEP. You can set up payment plans as long as they know. I think the biggest thing that happens a lot of times is something happens, something comes up, life happens, and then instead of actually acknowledging the situation, if you let it go, then it becomes a worse situation. Because if you owe a creditor $500 and you never say anything, and they keep calling you and they keep sending you letters in the mail, then they're just going to send it to collections. And then that collections is going to increase because now you have to pay the collection agency's fees. So that's something that I would say, do your free annual credit report. And if you have stuff that you know that you could have paid, you should have paid, go to them and say like, hey, here's what happened. Life happened to me. Can we set up a payment plan? So that would be one suggestion.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that one piece of advice, Kyle. That is always helpful to kind of know what we can, gauge with and take away with today. As we continue just with some more questions, could you perhaps share some stuff that you've seen, some successful interventions as far as things that have been in place to help reduce, some of these health disparities in low income communities?
Yeah, I definitely will have to turn that back to health visions. Like that's a great way to reduce those disparities. And just getting plugged in with local nonprofits. I know another really good one is Circles. They help out a lot. They get you connected with grants, and I know they have a bunch of different programs and activities that they do to kind of help with the disparity. When it comes to the financial standpoint of it, I think the biggest part of separating those disparities is that education piece and knowing how money works and knowing how important it is to have like those health benefits. I think that is a huge thing. So even if you're on something like WIC or SNAP or TANF, or if you're getting child support, having an education on how you budget that out is always key. I grew up in an environment where there was people who always had food stamps. So like back in the day when they actually gave you the before the cards, I should say. And there was a lot of people who would trade those off, or they would have one day the first time they get it, and then they just get a bunch of stuff. And most of the stuff was unhealthy things. And they didn't have a plan for, okay, maybe if I just stretch this out, instead of getting everything for the month, I do it for 2 weeks and then see what I have left over. Because one of the things about kind of like that food insecurity is taking, again, the same concept that we use for spending tracker and the spending part of it. How much food do you actually throw away? If you throw any away, but as being aware and being conscious of what am I doing? How am I spending whatever resources I have, and what types of things am I doing? And I think that really it won't make a huge dent in a disparity, but if you can help 1, 2, 3, 4 families, if you can help yourself, then you can take that information and share it. And as that information is shared, and as those processes and those behaviors are transferred to family and friends, then it makes for a better community.
Thank you for that, Kyle. And I love that cap off that you said of just that community. You know, it's realizing a lot of this can come from drawing in on each other. You know, finding out what do you know? Hey, what do you know? How did you do that? How did you go about that? Where did you go to get that help? So thank you. Let's ask what. Yeah, you didn't. Yeah, and I know we talked about this in class this past month, but could you talk a little bit about the 50-30-20? And is that something that we should be using? And how do we use that? And what is that?
Yeah, so 50-30-20 is a model for budgeting. So as you use 50% of your income, that should be things that you need, like your food, your housing, childcare. So that number is what that's for. The 50 is what your needs are. The 30 is for, I just went blank now. The 30 is for your saving, or that is for your wants. And as you use that 30 for your wants, that gives you the opportunity to do things that you want to do. And then that 20 is for your savings. So it is a model that you can readily use, but it's just a model. That's one of those things where you set it up to kind of break down what's important to you and how you utilize that. To give you an example, what I mean by that, personally, my 50-30-20 model is not 50-30-20 because there's a lot of things that I need to pay for. So sometimes you have to sacrifice what you want and you have to cut back on your savings, but you still have to save till it hurts, if that makes sense. So it's just a way to start out creating a budget, but then from that, knowing exactly what's important to you.
Okay, no, that's good. So a tool to kind of help you get started on the right path, where to go, the direction, give you some trajectory.
Exactly.
Okay, good. That's cool. That's cool. So we've talked a lot about, you know, finding the resources and getting connected. But what are some measures that an individual can take, you know, to improve health outcomes despite, you know, these economic challenges? So there may be, you know, that they don't have transportation. Well, what else could they be doing, you know, in the midst of that?
Yeah. Again, that's where that education and reaching out to people, going to places where you can get different resources. So I don't mean to plug a bunch of different places, but Fort Wayne Urban League, they're back up and running. So that would be a great place to where if you have some questions, maybe they know something that Health Vision doesn't necessarily cover, because I don't know how much Health Vision covers about rental assistance, or how much you cover about transportation needs. Um, so the more resources, the more people you can have, again, like we talked about, that community, the bigger community you have, the more access you have. And even though you may not have the absolute financial needs that to cover everything, but if you can cover more today or more tomorrow than you covered today, I always say you have to feed into your future self. You can either feed your future self or you can take away from your future self. And the lack of having conversations with different organizations and seeing what your needs are, the more difficult it is to kind of claw your way out of that quicksand pit. You have to ask for the help, and the more vines you can get thrown into that quicksand, the better it is for you to kind of pull your way out of it.
Okay. So it's aligning yourself with the acknowledgement of where you're at, and then kind of going from there on whom you could connect to, and taking it one step at a time, what bite off what you can handle, and go from there on finishing that sandwich or whatever.
Yeah.
So we had a good question in the chat that brings us back to something that you talked a little bit about earlier, which is that there's a health wealth connection in the Bible. Could you share, some passages or biblical ideals that you're referring to when you mention that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I always think of is how the church, as it came together, was not necessarily a church, it was a community. So when we think about biblical times, a lot of it was bartering. Okay, I can help you here, you help me here. You think about, like, even as you think about Jesus's journey, he was just walking through town to town, him and his disciples, and God always provided. So it's really more of a faith thing. To give you absolute scripture, I will have to go downstairs and get my notes for that. But that is really, for me, was the biggest takeaway, because as we think about wealth, a lot of times we think about having a bunch of assets, having that mansion, being like somebody who can buy whatever they want to. But essentially what wealth is what do I have that I can pass on to the next generation? Health is what am I doing when it comes to what I'm intaking? And think about how kingdoms are built. You think about all the things that we think of from a materialistic standpoint, but wealth is really being able to do what you need to do and do what you want to do when you want to do it. And there's a lot of people who do that, but they do it in a different way. So Jesus was probably the wealthiest person. I know Solomon was the richest person ever, but if you think about wealth, he literally just did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And that's because he was God in man form. But that to me is what wealth is. So when I say there's a biblical connection between health and wealth, he literally told us, don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about where you're going to go, where you're going to live. You don't have to worry about where you're going to lay your head. You just have to follow what I'm telling you to do. And I think that is really what that health and wealth is from a biblical standpoint. But I can definitely get back with you on some scripture if that's important to you. And yeah, I will definitely plug in everything I say now. I know it's being recorded. I know we're live, but you can always send me your email. And what we can do is we can chop it up and I'll talk to you and talk with everything that I'm talking about. So you can put it in the chat or you can put it on the Facebook Live page. And I'm happy to go through all those specific questions. And Yes, the Wayne Township Trustees Office is a great resource. Austin Knox and his team over there, they do a wonderful job. So that's definitely another resource, another vine to throw into the quicksand if that's where you're at. So yeah, absolutely.
Vine in the quicksand. I like that, Kyle. So you definitely did already kind of answer the question on what's the one piece of advice, but just to reiterate some things, maybe some people joined us later. What are some, let's go 3 to 4 steps, action steps that can be taken today? What are some things, we get off this call, it's like, oh, that was good, we learned some stuff, but what's some stuff we can, hey, let's try to do these things today. I may see Kyle out in roundabout and he might want to check in on me. Yeah, I thought you were on that call. What did you do? So what are these things we can try to do?
Yeah. First thing, get connected and stay connected. Having accountability, having community, having partnership is crucial. That's the number one thing, because it's easy to come on a call. You have that one experience, you have that one interaction, and then that simply falls off after there. One of the things I learned from the finance industry is that follow-up is key, because if you don't follow up, then you lose people. I follow up with people all the time who I've done mortgages for 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm not even originating. And I think it comes from a place for me of caring and knowing situations. So I think that is key. Having that accountability and that follow up and creating a community that you want to be a part of. So it's very uncomfortable initially, but then once you start doing it, it's a really cool thing to see. Second thing would be knowing where your resources are going and knowing how your resources are being utilized. And when I say resources, that could be your income, that could be any other programs that you may be a part of. It's just knowing where your resources are going. I always think of it from the standpoint of when, I can't remember what scripture it is, but when it said, if you cast your pearls to the pigs, it's like, why would you cast pearls to pigs? Like what? That doesn't make sense. And that's a lot of times what we do is we utilize our resources on places that are not beneficial for what our goals are. Because we can say we have this goal over here, but then our actions say something completely different. So being able to review, know, and understand where your resources are going. And a resource can be something as simple as time. And it could be the time you spent on this call. It could be the time that you spend after this call. It could be simply writing down what you think you want. So how do you utilize your resources? And then to come up with one more for you, I would say, yeah, honestly, praying about it. If you don't submit it to God, then you're just coming up with stuff on your own. Anything for me personally, anything you don't pray about is something that now is just Kyle. I can pray about trip to Hawaii all I want, but if that's not what God has planned for me, then I just spent a whole bunch of energy doing exact opposite of what God wanted me to do. Because maybe I'm thinking Hawaii, but he want me to go to Aruba or Cayman Islands. Just as beautiful, but I spent all my time and resources on what I wanted. So I think those are the 3 biggest takeaways I can give you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle. Those are phenomenal takeaways. Again, connection. So making those connections, making sure that you're finding community, finding space where you can grow in, getting those connections and staying connected. So having that followed up, being okay with, going to knock on the door again, like, hey, what was that you were saying? Let's talk about that some more. Excuse me. And then knowing your resources, so knowing the resource destination, I think that is vital. What you said of, it's not just the money, it's your time sometimes, or wherever else your things are going, where are they headed, where are they headed? And then that third thing of just, what was that? Praying. Yeah, that was awesome. So praying, if that's something that, again, you're accustomed to doing, taking that time with God, and you want to allow yourself to have him take over the plan, as he already is, you pray to him. And so those are great things. Kyle, you said some phenomenal things. We'll just have a few more minutes. If there's any other questions anyone else wants to ask, we'll allow a second for that. Oh, yes, thank you. So our next point of connection, as we get some more questions that may come in, is next Tuesday, the 24th at 11:30 at Health Visions Midwest, Fort Wayne, 5800 Fairfield Avenue. We will have our third course for the home ownership course with Ruoff and Kyle teaching that. And I think this one is going to be about something Kyle probably doesn't want me to say, but it's going to be about credit. So come on, y'all, come learn about that credit. Come learn about credit. He'll give you some more tips and trades. And then we'll have one final class for this session on the 31st at 11:30 as well, here at our offices, Health Visions Midwest, 5800 Fairfield Avenue. And yes, anyone can join those classes, even though I said that those were in a series. You can still come. You can still come to the class on Tuesday, and you can still come to that following class on the 31st.
Yeah, and I will say that it's okay that we mentioned we're talking about credit. I know people have a lot of misconceptions, and there's a lot of videos and TikToks and things out there about credit. But there's so many different types of credit. So we're gonna kind of dissect some of that, and yeah, it'll be a good conversation. So everyone is welcome. Bring your family, friends. Yeah, so I look forward to it.
Oh yeah, yep. And so so we have that for next point of connection in those classes. And as Kyle's has mentioned over the call several times, he is available. So all those who are on this call, the Zoom call, and then we'll try to get that information to those on the Facebook Live as well. That you have Kyle's information, he's available, and you can always just call Health Visions Midwest of Fort Wayne, and we'll get you connected as well. So with that, we ask that you, enjoy the rest of your day. Tune in next time to Aspire for more information and empowerment on, to live our best lives socially, physically, emotionally, mentally, and financially. So thank you, Kyle. Thank you, everyone who joined in. Until next time. Peace.